Hello class, this lecture is going to focus on Chapter 7 of the Basics in Biblical Hebrew textbook, which is going to focus on adjectives. So as we're focusing on adjectives, what we learned about nouns in one of the previous lessons is going to be super important and kind of form the backbone for what we learn here. So if you felt comfortable with nouns, you're going to feel like not much new has been introduced here with the adjectives. And so when we think about adjectives, we're going to look at the forms of the Hebrew adjective, meaning how they're spelled and what they look like written out in Hebrew. Then we're going to look at the function of the adjectives. Particularly, we're going to look at 3 of the functions of adjectives. And we're also going to look at something that talks about direction to or towards a place, called the directive he, or a directional ending is what it's also called. One of the things that I want to say here really briefly before we continue, though, is that sometimes when you're learning a foreign language and one of the biblical languages, and this was true of me when I was learning Hebrew and Greek as well, was I realized that there were a lot of things in English grammar, English just composition, English in general, that I wasn't familiar with the formal names for. I was introduced to those maybe in grade school, middle school, and high school, and since English is my first language, understanding what things like adjectives were, or even when you get into more complex ideas within grammar, I took those for granted because I know how to speak, I know how to write English, and so I can do those things without knowing the formal name for what I'm doing. So if as we come across things like adjectives, or as we come across like the attributive use or the substantive use of the adjective, if you don't know what that means in English, don't worry and don't let that frustrate you. Instead, take this as an opportunity to kind of brush up on your English grammar, and then also to learn this idea in Hebrew. And even if you can't remember what that means after you walk away from this lecture and after you read the textbook, uh, you'll be able to translate it that way, just like you can read English that way without knowing kind of all of the formal things that are going on within a sentence. Now, it's good to know those things. I'm not trying to undermine that. I'm just saying don't make that your priority. Make learning the Hebrew and being able to read the Hebrew your priority. So, Hebrew adjectives function like English adjectives. Adjectives modify, describe, characterize, or classify nouns. And one of the ways that you can kind of brush up on your English grammar and knowing what these things mean is by doing something like Mad Libs, right? Where it's one of those things where it's telling a story and you fill in the blanks. My kids love these. My kids even make these on their own. And it'll say like put an adjective here or put an adverb there. Whenever you do that, you have to know what that basic idea is. So maybe work on some ad libs. But an adjective is something that's used to modify, describe, or characterize or classify a noun, like the word good. We'll look at that here in just a moment. Hebrew adjectives inflect and indicate gender and number, just like what we talked about with Hebrew nouns. So when we talked about the word sus and then the word susim, right? And we looked at the word Torah and Toroth for the feminine, right? So you've got those masculine plural and feminine plural endings of im and oath at the end of words. And you've got the generic kind of feminine ending, which is most of the time is an ah sound. The endings for Hebrew adjectives are the same endings that we learned for nouns. So if you're familiar with those endings, you're going to be familiar with the endings for adjectives. This isn't going to come as a surprise. So we've got the word tov here, which means good. And if you want to pair this word tov with a feminine noun, you would say the word tovah. So if you wanted to say, we'll look at the construct like good woman, you're going to use the word isha and tova. But if you want to say good man, you're going to say ish tov. Ish tov. So that is how how adjectives are inflected, right? Meaning how they match up with their noun counterparts. So if you wanted to say good men or good women, right, the plural there, you'd have to use the im and the oath endings, right? Anashim tovim or nashim tovot. Adjectives sometimes have no spelling change when they've got those unchangeable long vowels, as they're often called, like the holam wow. So tov, tova, tovim, tovoth. Right? There's no spelling change. You're going to see that. You're going to recognize it. Nothing should catch you off. The Hirak Yod is going to do the same thing with that word tzaddik, right? Tzaddik, tzaddikah, tzaddikim, tzaddikot, right? So all that this is saying is sometimes there's no spelling changes, just like with Hebrew nouns. But sometimes, right, when you add that extra syllable, right, there's going to be that propretonic reduction like we saw in the Hebrew nouns. So like that word davar, if you remember, which means word, matter, thing. And then when we make it plural, it's divarim, right? That kametz moves to a schwa. It changes to a schwa because you've got that propretonic reduction. Same thing is going to happen here with adjectives. So you've got the word gadol, right? The kametz there is going to turn into a schwa. This word gadol just means like large, right? Gadol, gedolah, or gedolim, or gedolot. Still the same basic sound. You've just got the reduction of that propretonic vowel. So same thing you could see with the word hakam there, which means wise. Hakam, hakama, hakamim, right? Hakamot. So you've got that propretonic reduction. Sometimes words that end in segel hey, right? So you've got the masculine ending looking like this. Then you've just got the same basic endings with that hey really just dropping off. So you've got kashe, kasha, kashim, kashoth. You're going to have to recognize these. You don't have to reproduce them. All that I'm saying with all of these slides, including this one about the geminants here, is that there are some minor spelling differences depending on what the root of the word is. So if you remember, we talked about geminants, and the root is where that in the original kind of root, it's doubled. So this would be like resh, beit, right? Ravav is kind of like the original word. In the masculine, though, that it's just dropped off, rav, but it's going to come back in the form of a dagash forte, rava, ravim, ravot. So you see that dagash forte in that middle position there, in that middle radical, in the bait right there. So this shouldn't throw you off. You should still be able to recognize this. You'll recognize it in its place in the sentence, that it's an adjective. All that these slides are here to do is not to confuse you, not to upset you or anything like that, but they're there to show you that there can be some minor spelling differences or different things like that with the adjectives, but nothing major is going to happen. Same thing if you've got a guttural kind of in that position within a geminate, you're going to have like compensatory lengthening or virtual doubling, like what we talked about previously. So just like what we said with nouns, you've got the lexical form, which is how you would look up the word. So the lexical form is just kind of the common form of the word. So if you were looking this up in a lexicon, which is basically a dictionary, if you were looking it up in a lexicon, you would look up, like, for instead of tovim, you're not going to look that up. You're going to look up the word good, tov, instead. So that's just a matter of, if you're ever looking something up in a lexicon, that's how you would look it up. So I want to talk about the three main uses, the three ways that adjectives are used. And the first one is the attributive use of the adjective. Again, don't let that scare you that we're using kind of fancy language here. An attributive adjective modifies a noun. A very common way that an adjective is used. So if you want to say a good man, what you would say is ish tov. The word ish means man. The word tov means good. And it's saying a good man. Attributive adjectives are going to agree in gender, in number, and in definiteness. Definiteness is whether or not they have the definite article, right? So ish and tov are both masculine singular. Ish, man, masculine singular. Tov, masculine singular. A good man. Ha-ish, ha-tov, they still agree in gender and in number and in definiteness. The gender is masculine, the number is singular, and the definiteness is they are both definite. So this has got the definite article, the hey, right in front of it. So ha-ish, ha-tov, right? The man, the good, right? It's just trying to say the good man. That's what this is saying. That's how you'd translate it. You wouldn't translate it the man the good or man good above, right? Ishtov, man good, right? Instead, you would translate it a good man. That's what they're indicating. That's how their syntax works. In the same way that that you would translate other languages where the syntax it just differs from English. A good woman, isha, woman. Tova, good. It's just the word good, right? It's just got the feminine singular ending there. So isha, feminine singular. Tova, feminine singular. Ha-isha, ha-tova, right? The good woman. So both of them are both definite. They have the definite article before them. So that's the attributive use. It's just modifying the noun. The predicative adjective asserts something about the noun, and it agrees in gender and number, but it'll disagree in definiteness, and that's how you'll know that it's the predicative usage, right? So if you wanted to say the man is good instead of just the good man, you'd say Tov ha'ish, good is the man. Or the man is good in English is how we would represent that. And you could actually say this in two different ways. You could either have the adjective in the first position or in the second position here. So Tov, good, Ha'ish, the man. So good is the man, or you'd translate it in English as the man is good. And then Ha'ish Tov, the man, good. This would be in English what we would kind of call like a verbless clause, where the verb is implied. So you would put that is there because it's implied within the way that it's the syntax of the sentence. This is how they represent the phrase the man is good in their language, in the ancient Hebrew language, classical Hebrew. So the woman is good, tova ha'isha, right? Notice they agree in gender and number, feminine singular, but they disagree in definiteness. So that's how you're going to know that it's the predicative use of the adjective. And then you've got the substantive use of the adjective. And this one should be pretty easy. This is just where the adjective is basically used independently like a noun. So we've got a phrase here, bain, which is the word between. Bain tov uvein ra. Between good and between evil. So Hebrew is really repetitive in the way that it represents things. So it's going to use that word between twice. This is very common. And when we translate it into English, we always drop out that second one almost all of the time. So, but if it ever says between something, it'll usually use the word between twice. So between, like, so if it said like he was like with Ezekiel, I think it's in Ezekiel chapter 8, or with Absalom when it talks about how his hair gets stuck in a tree, it talks about Ezekiel and Absalom as hovering between heaven and between earth. I believe in both of those instances it used that word bain twice. So, but anyway, bain tov uvein ra, between good and between evil, right? So good and evil there are both adjectives, but they're used substantively or substantively, right? So im hat yashar, the word yashar there is the adjective. It means like upright. And here you've got the definite article before it. So the upright one is the idea that it's giving. That's the picture that it's giving. Someone who's upright is someone who is righteous. Is kind of the idea. So we've just finished talking about adjectives, their main usages, and none of that should really throw you off. There's not a whole lot to learn here, so don't let that overwhelm you. It's if you know the patterns of Hebrew nouns as far as the form goes, you're going to feel comfortable with the form of Hebrew adjectives. And if you're getting caught up on those different words where we talked about like the substantive, the predicative, right, those kinds of things, don't get overly obsessed on that. Try to learn them one idea at a time. Focus on one at a time. The other thing that we want to talk about, and this is the last main thing that we want to talk about in this particular lesson, is the directional hay, or the directive hay, as it's often called. This is when you've got a comet's hay that appears at the end of a word that can indicate like a place. And whenever you've got a word that can be a place, even if it's a generic place, even if it's the word like there, you can have this directional ending on it. And by putting this directional ending, this comet's hay at the end of a word, It can mean direction to or toward that place. So the word land, eretz, if you put the directive he, or the directional ending on the end of it, you've got artsa, and it means to a land, right? To a land, like to that place, to that land. So you've got like the word there at the very end, the last one of these, the word sham, very, very generic word, right? Yeah, it just means there. So if you wanted to say he's going to there, he's going like over there, you'd say sham'ah. It's one of the ways that you could say it. There are other ways that you can say this as well. So notice you could even do this with a place name like Jerusalem, right? Yerushalayim, Yerushalayma, right? That to Jerusalem. Timnah is the name of a city. Timnatah, right, is how you'd say it. So you've got this directional ending that will appear to talk about direction to or towards a place. Now, don't get too confused with this. You're like, oh no, right? Feminine nouns also have this, and feminine adjectives also have this. Yes, but this is talking about like a place in direction to that place. Again, within the context of a sentence or a phrase, it will be apparent that that is what this is. If you can remember that sometimes that comate at the end, that's what it's indicating is direction to or towards a place. Don't let that overwhelm you. Right? Again, we're learning a lot of new concepts, and they're probably all coming in, and it feels like there's a lot of them. Take them one at a time, master one at a time, and you'll be okay. So before you move on, kind of memorize those inflectional endings, at least being able to recognize them, right? You don't have to reproduce them from scratch or anything like that, but memorize them. And if you know them for nouns, right, then you'll be good, right? The im, oath endings. Understand the spelling changes that occur. The propretonic reduction, for instance, is probably the biggest one. And then memorize the three uses of the adjective. Again, just know how each of those is working. Go back, read the textbook, look at what's going on, and then memorize kind of the form and function of the directional ending, to or towards a place. So let's look at some of the vocabulary this week. Kodesh is the word for holy or holiness, right? So kodesh, holiness, or something that is holy. Ra'ah is the word evil or wickedness. So some of these words have what we call a wide semantic range, right? So this word ra'ah is one of those words with a really big semantic range. It can mean moral evil. It can also mean disaster or calamity or destruction. So it doesn't mean all of those things every time it's used. You know from the context that it's used in. So gadol means great or big or large, right? Again, you just have to look at the context. All of those words mean basically the same thing, right? And these are adjectives. Zakain is old or elderly. So zakain. Zar is the word for foreign or strange. Hai is the word for living or alive. So all that is alive. Hakam is the word for wise or skillful. Can also mean experience. Tov, good or pleasant, mostly good. Yashar, meaning upright, has this idea or connotation of just, right? If someone is upright, they're just, they're not crooked. Ma'at, little or few. Ma'at. Sadiq, righteous, just, innocent. Righteous is probably the most common one. Kadosh, holy, set apart. Right? Kadosh, holy. Katon, small. Can also mean young or insignificant. So if you go and you read the David and Goliath narrative, David is described in this way. He's the small one, is how he's described. And being described as small, it's trying to contrast him with Goliath, and it's trying to contrast him with Saul as well. Karov, near or close. Karov. So again, you can see all of these adjectives. They're descriptor words, whether something's near, whether something's small, if something's holy. Rav means great or many. Rachok is distant. So Abraham looked and he saw a distant place in that binding of Isaac narrative. Rachok is the word used there. Ra is the word bad or evil. So notice you can see similarities in spelling. Ra'ah, that second word on the noun section. Ra'ah. And then you've got ra there for bad, evil, or wicked. And then you've got rasha, right? Rasha as wicked or guilty. And then just a word that's kind of in the other category in the textbook. Me'od is the word for very or exceedingly. So you could say like very wicked, right? So you could say somebody's name, Jeroboam, right, was very wicked, right? And that's how you would if you really wanted to say that they were wicked a lot, you'd use that word me'od, like he did exceptional wickedness. I hope that this wasn't overwhelming. I hope that it made sense to you. I hope that as you're going through this, you don't get overwhelmed. Again, if you know those patterns for Hebrew nouns, you should feel very comfortable with these adjectives. Now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of his Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in his peace.